Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Dennis Heil, and I am diagnosed with type 2 bipolar disorder with severe depression and high functioning autism. I've been living with bipolar disorder for over 30 years, 15 of which I spent undiagnosed. In 2009, I experienced a depressive psychotic break that led to my diagnosis of type 2 bipolar disorder. I would be diagnosed with autism a few years later. In my podcast, Bluntly Bipolar, I'm going to share with you my experiences and the hard lessons I've learned trying to find some peace and happiness in my life. I hope that by sharing my experiences, others can avoid learning these lessons the hard way. I'm not a mental health professional. All I am is a mental patient with a microphone. Listener discretion is advised. Anger played a pivotal role in feeding my bipolar disorder and depression, as well as complicating social and emotional matters through my high-functioning autism. In this mini-series prefixed on anger, I'll be exploring the role anger played in my mental and wellness, and how it was used as a weapon to manipulate me as a straight white man from a blue-collar working-class background. This is On Anger, Deconstructing the White and Straight White Male. As a straight white man, I never stopped to consider my whiteness, because why the fuck would I? But as the culture wars started flaring up back around 2015-ish or so, I did start thinking about it a lot more. I was more aware of various aspects of race identity and racism, but not really educated on it. I'd look to the left and I'd hear dumbass shit like, you can't be racist against white people. Then I'd look to the right and hear more dumbass shit like, if we just stopped talking about it, it'd stop existing. And in both cases, I'd think, what the fuck are these people talking about? To me, neither of them seemed to make any sense. Frankly, I didn't want anything to do with any of that idiocy. But then I got curious and I started to not only dig deeper into myself, but also to try to understand where this was all coming from. I heard the phrase, race is a social construct, but I'd think, what does that actually mean? Because that's an interesting phrase. That is, though there is a lot of genetic variation between people, we are all one race, human. We are one species, Homo sapiens. Biologically, we are all more similar than we are different, which is why we are one race, regardless of genetic variations as drastic as skin tone. In fact, the American Association of Biological Anthropologists says that we are all about 99.9% the same, with that last 0.1% being what accommodates things like skin tone and body structure. Race as a social construct is a way to acknowledge that some of how we feel about the color of our skin was created as a means to elevate some and push others down. You can tell it's a construct because whiteness is something that's evolved over the years, like back when they didn't consider Italians and Irish people as white, but then they started to feel outnumbered and welcome them in. Jews appear to be kind of accepted in some circles, kind of not in others. But you can actually see this in action nowadays, where the white racists are kind of tolerating and accepting light-skinned Hispanics far more than they ever did. I know there's a lot of issues with colorism in Hispanic culture, but that is like two separate things. There's no world in which a hardcore white American racist is going to see light-skinned Hispanics as equals. That's just not how it works. Still, it's kind of telling how superficial their belief systems actually are. They could just kind of include people when they start feeling outnumbered. Because if we were so different by color as a racist claim, then they wouldn't have just been able to roll out the red carpet for these other outgroups. And really, when you look at the hardcore racists, they aren't accepting of these people at all. They just use them as another means of plausible deniability to hide behind. Or as people of color like to say, tokens eventually get spent. But then you have white people say things like, I don't see color, which sounds enlightened on the surface. That's basically what I was taught as a child and how I treated people for the most part. That's the goal, right? To see everyone as equals. I eventually came to understand that the problem with that phrase is that it only acknowledges one facet of the problem of racism, and that is personal racism. That, however, leads to a much different problem altogether. That is that racism is baked into the bones of the United States of America. It wasn't until I started working in marketing that I began to understand how marketing and propaganda had shaped the perception of the American experience as much as it has. Propaganda, marketing, and media are used to shape our point of view to default to that of being a white American, a white white-centered social perspective. For example, I was around 20 when 9/11 happened. Being white and in a heavily conservative area, it was patriotism as far as the eye could see. God bless the USA, and we're going to get those terrorists, flags. And in the years that followed, as social unrest came and went, I recall hearing over and over from white people that they wish we could be as united as we were after 9/11. And that is a white-centered social perspective, because I wonder if the 6 Muslim Americans and other people that look anything remotely Middle Eastern would agree. Because I'm going to go on a limb and guess no, based on the fact that hate crimes against Muslims went up 1,600% from 2000 to 2001, according to the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. What the phrase "I don't see color" communicates is, I don't understand how racism is embedded in the fabric of our country, because if I did, I would understand that I have subconscious habits and behaviors that come from racism. Like not even questioning that, hey, maybe we all aren't so united. In fact, maybe Americans of Middle Eastern descent might not be having a good time. Let me give you a more recent example. Did you think that black fatigue was a fair way to criticize the trashy behavior of some black folks that was going around through the media and social media when that was at its peak? Well, hell, even now, I recently saw a news story about some black folks getting kicked off a cruise somewhere, because all I can think is, don't any of y'all know any white trash? Why is this being put in front of us? Trashy behavior is all it is. Well, why are black folks put under the microscope for it? No one ever called that shit white fatigue. It's a double standard in the same way that we talk about black on black crime, but never white on white crime, even though we offended similar rates. 88.9% of black victims were killed by black offenders, but 82.4% of white victims were killed by white offenders. Yet we have black on black violence as a common media talking point that we're all exposed to regularly. That's why we need to see color when it comes to the way society functions. Otherwise, you walk away with a far worse opinion. And then we come to the N word. Don't worry, I'm not going to say it. I honestly thought about it, mostly because I'm tired of listening to white people whine about not being able to say it without getting punched in the face. All this talk about being an alpha, being a man, and so scared to get their ass kicked for it. Hearing people say things like, oh, you think it's okay to commit an act of violence against someone over a word, is such a mind-numbingly sheltered take. It's not about the word, it's about the disrespect and the hate that the word represents when used by a white person towards black people. I sincerely can't tell if these people are just being willfully ignorant for plausible deniability, or if they genuinely don't get it. So I'm going to spell it out for the people who don't genuinely get it. You don't go around, act disrespectfully to people, and then act surprised when there's consequences. You have no idea who you're fucking around with. People get killed over nothing all the time. But pride, ego, respect, doesn't matter what I think is right or wrong. What I know to be true is that if I run my mouth to the wrong person, there is a chance I may get swung on, stabbed, or shot. Some people don't value themselves or their lives at all, and they're willing to throw it away over anything. That's reality. And if that's not a reality or environment you've ever lived in, then it may come as a surprise to learn that. But to come out and act surprised that violence could be the outcome of throwing racial slurs, blatant disrespect around is either disingenuous or painfully naive. And as I was thinking about this, I had a strange realization. Because like I said, I've done a lot of shitty things in my life, particularly when I was swimming in the sewers of the internet. But the times in my life where I had a personal problem with a person of color, I never defaulted to slurs. That always felt off to me, because I didn't hate them or had a problem with the color of their skin. Usually it was just a clash in personality or money. I never felt superior to anyone, so why would I want to make someone feel inferior and small? It's the same reason I try to avoid using disparaging words towards women that focuses on their sex. Now, I've expressed this opinion in the past, and I've been told that it's not that deep. But it is that deep. Words and the way they are used are weapons used to create these attitudes and perceptions. The words we use are a reflection of who we are as a person. Not only that, if y'all are so keen for traditional masculinity, bro, what do you think happened when disrespect happened between men? Like, well, hell, even recently in the right areas, if you act disrespectfully to another man, there's a good chance he's going to take a swing at you to check you, because that's the way it works. And that makes no sense because they have all these people that are going on and on and on. It's just a word. It's just a word. And it's not. It's about respect. And if someone comes along and disrespects your family's suffering, the people that you've lost, your ancestors that were enslaved or spit on or ran out of town or whatever fucking horrible things that white people did to black folks, like, what do you expect? But they kind of leave that part out of the equation. They never touch on the respect part of that. Anyway, I didn't always believe that words were such a powerful thing. Before, I used to believe that it shouldn't be taken that seriously, and I wasn't all that careful with my words. But you can't say it's not that serious out of one side of your mouth and then say, yes, take me seriously out the other. Particularly as a person with severe mental illness, we are often faced with questions about our ability and capability. Some of them are fair, some of them are not. I would have been offended at the idea early on, but after a while, I've come to accept my bipolar disorder for what it is. It severely affected my life at several levels, and it's only through luck or divine providence that I'm still here. That said, how can a person claim that they're not racist or bigoted while using racist or bigoted words? They get mad or defensive when other people think they're racist. People just don't function that way. It's like lighting a fuse and then acting surprised when the fireworks go off. The intent is disrespect, and with many people, disrespect will get you punched in the face, at minimum. All of it comes from such a sheltered, naive perspective of the world in general. Just like the 2024 election. I've heard so many people say things like, if white men and leftists voted for Harris, we wouldn't be in the predicament right now. No, not this one specifically, but it would still be a matter of white folks being oblivious to Don McCon and the racism that underpins our society. Because I don't know whose ingenious idea it was to try to appeal to white working class man by finding a token white guy to put in a subservient position to a black woman, but good game on that decision. And don't get it twisted, I've never voted for Trump and it didn't affect my decision either way. I like Tim Walz's politics and what he's done for the people of Minnesota. I wish he were further left. However, in what world is picking racial pandering a good strategy option? It's like they learned nothing from the spite vote against Hillary Clinton. Sure, we don't need to listen to or care about the problems of white men. Instead, we have token Tim. Vote for us. Much like with people of color, white tokens don't fare well in white communities either. It's such obvious pandering, the kind of pandering that makes you think that they're just insulting your intelligence. They think we're stupid, and it's the kind of pandering that makes me want to do things out of spite. And I know I'm far from the only one that feels that way. But I still voted for Kamala and token Tim regardless. Because Trump is a far greater threat to the people who are here in this country. I tend to take my cues from pro-black leftists because they are arguably the ones who have been struggling against the society for the longest time. Now let's post that in Hispanic folks. I've regularly heard white leftists talking about the revolution, and I think society-wide revolution is about as unlikely as the full-blown race war that the white supremacists dream about. It's just not enough people to cause a drastic change across all of society. It's far more realistic to embrace the smaller strategies and keep pushing to chip away at what we have. I mean, it worked for the white nationalists that basically control the government. I feel like a lot of social reform is taken by white privilege as well. For example, when the Democrats were talking about funding but reforming the Department of Homeland Security and ICE agents through additional training, like the idea that you can reform a cop that thinks it's acceptable to shoot a woman in the face and call her a bitch or execute a man in broad daylight or any of the other brutalities that ICE has been using is odd. It's a childish, sheltered perspective because it also doesn't address the number of January 6ers and adjacent groups involved with that who joined those organizations after they relaxed their standards. It doesn't acknowledge the racism that comes along with those groups that is now embedded in those groups on top of everything else. Now you may be thinking, not everything is about racism. No, not everything. But a hell of a lot more is than is not in our society and the way that the United States functions. That ranges from exploiting third world countries to our legal system, to redlining, to our government never honoring its agreements with its citizens of colors and indigenous people, to the school to prison pipeline that affects black kids most severely. But at the same time, you hear messaging on the left like, there's no war but class war, or there is no left versus right, it's up versus down, which to me both sound like perspective that comes from white privilege. It's more of that colorblind nonsense. You'd have to be white to be able to ignore racism, and more specifically, anti-black racism in the context of those battle cries of the United States. I feel like you'd also need to be white to think it's a good idea to try to convince people of color to care more about the way they're treated as a class versus racism. In my mind, that's essentially communicating, I'm here to tell you what you should and should not care about. It'd be an immediate turnoff to just about anyone. I don't know. I'm still kind of trying to figure out where I sit with my own whiteness and cultural heritage. Being of German and British descent, it's not culturally fantastic. I'm a bit envious of other cultures who have a lot of vibrance and beauty woven into their culture or tight social networks. As it relates to America, once you start becoming more aware of how deeply embedded historical racism is and how prevalent it still is today, it's pretty damn hard to feel patriotic. But it is what it is, I guess. I guess the best use of my whiteness and life experience is to hopefully give white men something to think about. I always try to keep politics out of my past work because I try to convince myself it wasn't intertwined. But it's obvious to me how naive that is. I mean, it's not like that people want to pay for social services and pay mental health professionals what they deserve. So much funding comes from the government. You kind of can't ignore politics. But not only that, anger and depression are weapons being used by the elites to manipulate men and boys like me, of my skin color, every day. And they aren't doing it for any good or noble reasons. They're solely doing it to protect their own power, to do what they want, while they steal from everybody else and each other. After all, sharks will eat their own when they smell blood in the water. Thank you for spending your time with me. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share this with someone you think it might help. Take it easy.